Tea time with me, Shelly Chopra. The state of the market has a whole lot of people shaken up. The volatility, the lack of reform, flip-flop in policies, and whatever else that would keep the markets in move, the short-term FI money, all that has gone into a turmoil. Which is why today our special guest, Ajay Srinivasan of Aditiya Birla Financial Services, will give us some perspective on whether or not the Lal Street and just the fundraising market is coming back on the course.
So you get these swings and volatility in asset prices because of the liquidity. But I think the underlying macro is still kind of sorting itself out.
In news, Shan Chanfeng becomes the first major winner from China at LPGA Championship. Lee Williams wins Mexican Open on nationwide tour. And golfing tip with Jasjeet Singh.
I am allowed to walk into the bush and take my stance.
In 96. Wow, हाँ वही. क्या डिस्टेंस है बंकर में?
Par 4?
ग्रीन कितनी दूर है यहाँ से?
Welcome to the show, Ajay.
Thank you, Shari.
Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Nice to meet you.
It's good to have you here from Mumbai in Delhi.
It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, we've kind of plucked you out of the city of finance to the city of golf, if one could put it that way.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah? When did you pick up golf? It's been a long time now.
No, I started actually pretty late. I started in 2006.
2006.
2006, yeah.
Okay. So that then is recent.
Yes.
I thought you picked it up in
No,
the
I used to
90s.
play cricket and then I moved to Hong Kong and I found cricket not as popular and not as common as golf obviously is.
Right.
So I picked up golf in around 2006.
And Japan, Korea, are the places where golf is the big story, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's probably the only story.
The only story.
So if you're in business, then golf becomes pretty much the language of business there.
Yeah, that's indeed true, and which takes me to the point that so when you were in Hong Kong working with Prudential, right?
That's right.
So what was the business like on the course?
Actually, there wasn't much business on the course, but I think the relationship building was really on the course. So, especially like you say, Japan and Korea, a lot of the distributors we would work with, a lot of the corporates we would work with, all of them would like to be called out to the course and have a chat to get to really know you and know the company.
Yeah.
I think there was no presentations, there was no formality about the interaction.
No obsession with the PowerPoint.
No obsession with the PowerPoint, and not much business talk, but very general, good ability to kind of figure out each other and get to know each other.
So how was the experience in Asia, and have you had a chance to spend a lot of time there before as well?
No, I moved to Asia in early 2000, so just I think January 1, 2001. And I covered 10 markets in Asia, so I really covered from Japan to Dubai, setting up businesses. So in that sense, I spent a lot of time in different markets in Asia, and every market is different, and every market has a has a different kind of golf environment and some beautiful golf courses.
That's true. The longest ones though come through Japan, don't they?
Actually, yeah. But I've played some beautiful courses in Vietnam. I've played some wonderful courses in Taiwan, Korea, of course, many courses in Korea. So it can be very different.
It can be. I'm going to tee off, and then we're going to catch Ajay on what he does best: the market environment and playing the game. Avoid the bunker and get onto the fairway. But there are plenty of roadblocks, Ajay, and you and I see them every day when one looks at the Lal Street. New policies, different policies. Often there is news flow that doesn't work for the markets. Where do we stand today on just the market mood?
We're in a pretty challenging macro environment globally in any case, and I think India also has a fairly challenging macro. So I think that's kind of playing out in different ways. I think that's kind of compensated for the huge amount of liquidity that's there in the market. So you get these swings and volatility in asset prices because of the liquidity. But I think the underlying macro is still kind of sorting itself out. And India has its own issues with, the fiscal, with the current account deficit, with inflation, with interest rates.
Yeah.
So I think we're in a slightly different place.
So you talked to them.
Once in 3 months.
That's lovely. We're talking about policy, we're talking about interest rates. We have this massive issue of GAR, which the finance minister has now pushed back to the relief of the markets. But is a delayed GAR any better?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I don't know what it'll actually turn out, whether it'll be in the same form or it'll be slightly different. But I think we've become so dependent on foreign investment into the markets. If you look at domestic flows into the market, we've seen insurance flows slow down, we've seen mutual funds slow down, we've seen retail participation in equity markets slow down. So we have become really quite dependent on foreign flows, and therefore I think whatever we do, we need to take that into account when we frame a policy like this.
These foreign flows for many years were governed by pockets around the world. Japan was one at one stage. Then we had a clutch of European, London-based funds that were pumping in money. Is there something that you're seeing today in terms of the nature of money, more particularly from the countries that it's coming in?
No, I think it's been a mix over the past of long only funds, some hedge funds. I think you've seen hedge fund activity probably reduce significantly. I think over the last year there would have been some pension funds who kind of came into the market. So I think the good thing from our market will be when we see long-term money coming in.
So where did you grow up, Ajay?
I grew up in Delhi.
And you were an economics student all through?
Yeah, I did my economics bachelor's from St. Stephen's in Delhi. Studied, school was also Delhi.
When did you decide that you wanted to be a financial whiz?
It happened purely by accident, actually. I was more likely to join the civil service. That was the
done thing.
That was the done thing, and if you got to Stephens, that was even more the done thing. Either that, or I was looking at doing a master's in economics because I really liked the subject. And then I don't know how I went and gave the entrance for the IIM, and I got through, and things kind of moved one after the other, and I ended up in the financial world.
But what has been the most challenging phase? Because I'm sure, while of course, I'm sure you loved all the companies that you worked with, or mostly all of them, but it must have been the timing of those jobs that might have made them especially challenging.
Actually, I've seemed to have been in challenging situations across everything. I mean, I'll give you examples.
Including your current job.
Yeah, true. So when I started out, we had the major crash of '87. I joined ITC in '91. '92 was the big stock market scam. I went to Asia in 2000. It was SARS, just after the Asian crisis.
Yes.
So I've come back. There's a global financial crisis. So crisis kind of follow me around, I guess. And it's been a part of my
God, I wonder what
career.
Mr. Birla has to say about that. But Birla Sun Life and Birla Financial as a group was something that you did make news when you decided to quit Prudential and come down here. I know you made news for compensation packages, but in those times what was critical was that Mr. Birla needed somebody to be here. Do you think or do you feel that what you set out to achieve, you've managed to do that?
I think we made a lot of progress in the direction of where we were trying to go. I think the last 2.5 years has been a fairly tough market from I talked about the macro, but I think financial services pretty much feels the brunt of that because we're in the forefront of what happens.
But the first 2 years when you were here, actually the markets did pretty well.
Yeah, so I've been through a great bull year. The first year was a great bull year. The second year was a pretty down year, and the last 2 years have kind of been a bit mixed. So I think we've made very good progress. I think top line's grown well. We've built a broad range of businesses. We built a good customer franchise. We are reasonably profitable. A good return on the capital we put in. So I think from a number of perspectives, I'm very happy with the progress we've made.
What kind of growth are you seeing, and are there specific segments within the Birla Financial umbrella which are working better for you than the others?
See, we've got a mix of two types of businesses. We've got some agency businesses which are fee-based, commission-based, so life insurance, mutual funds, wealth management, broking.
Yeah.
All of those have had some, some headwinds in the last couple of years. The business that I think overall, even if I look at the industry, I think the businesses that have been doing well are the lending businesses. So businesses where you put money on your balance sheet and use your balance sheet, those have been doing much better. So we've seen this, similar stuff. We've seen, life insurance new business sales have been down, mutual fund AUM has been kind of flat. So in that environment, our focus has been saying how do we build market share, because if there are some headwinds from a growth perspective, then what we need to do is really do better than the market.
But are people convinced that these tough times are all right for them to make a first entry into the market? I'm sure a large number of your investors are also the retail investors.
Oh yeah, we have a very
and they're
large...
kind of shy of the market today because of its volatility, aren't they?
Oh yeah, sure. But I think, we have the regular, so life insurance has regular investment plans, the mutual fund has, systematic investment plans. So I think people are getting more used to the concept that as long as you invest regularly in the market, over a period of time it works for you. See, our business is a business of trust at the end of the day. We don't sell tangible products that people can touch and feel and, figure whether it works or not.
Ajay, tell us a little bit about just going around the world playing golf. I know, but I can see a nice Accenture match play t-shirt that you're wearing. So obviously you're interested in also watching golf and tracking it.
Yes, I haven't been to too many tournaments to watch golf, but having been to one, I think now I'm going to make it more a regular thing.
Who could be our favorite potential partner, dream four ball, so to speak?
Dream four ball, I would love to play with Rory McIlroy. I think he has an absolutely amazing game. Just to watch him play. I think Phil Mickelson for just the ease with which he plays. I'd love Kapil Dev.
He's the chip master, isn't he?
Oh, he is. I'd love Kapil Dev. I believe he plays a mean game.
I have to admit, he's the longest hitter I know in India.
Yeah, so...
And we've been lucky to win a tournament thanks to him.
So I think, yes, some mix like that would be good.
There would be indeed, yeah. Rory McIlroy, potential to replace Tiger.
Well, he's got an amazing game. He's got the fantastic draw. I find, so the tournament I went to watch, Tiger was there, McIlroy was there. You could see the crowd pull that both of them have.
I have managed to now McIlroy has managed to also get himself a serious fan following.
Oh yes.
The younger people for sure. But you talked about McIlroy, a guy who's actually seriously into cold play. He plays golf to play golf. He's still less of a showman, but for sure it's about quick game and wrapping it up and playing with precision.
Yes.
And that's very much the story of how you play these markets, isn't it? The markets are constantly posing challenges. As a leader yourself, what do you keep in mind when you're attacking the street?
I think you've got to have perspective. I think that's the most important thing in markets. I think because you get these huge swings in sentiment between extreme greed and extreme fear. And I think just having a balance and having a perspective, I think is a very important thing to do in the markets, because otherwise you could get whipsawed very easily.
What has it been like at the Birla Group? Do you think, now that you've been there for nearly 4 years, and I'm guessing you're enjoying it, that's why you're there, what do you think has worked for you at the group? And what is it about the group's ideology that has managed to keep up the business?
See, our business is a business of trust at the end of the day. We don't sell tangible products that people can touch and feel and figure whether it works or not. And in that business, it's very important to have a brand that people can relate to and trust. And I think the Birla brand is absolutely outstanding in that regard. Yes. I think the values, the culture really works very well for me personally, and I think in the business in which I operate. And I think the whole style in terms of the empowerment that's available to managers who operate there, I think it's really wonderful.
But have you ever had any regrets about the speed at which the business has grown? Because Birlas have been known to go slow, choose slowly. In financial services, sometimes that can be a hindrance. Did you feel so?
there's a difference between speed and haste, and I think you've got to make sure that you don't do things hastily. You can still do things fast, but not hastily.
Yeah.
And I think I've never felt that being an issue here. I think it's there is enough movement. Mr. Birla is a fairly aggressive businessman. He does have big aspirations and
That's
ambitions
true.
for the businesses
Yeah.
he has.
That's why I think often people have wondered why that didn't translate in financial services. I mean, looking at his acquisitions and his metal majors has been quite a story. But the fear in financial services has been the fear of downsizing. I mean, one looks at the Indian opportunity of 1.2 billion people, so many wallets. The question doesn't arise, why would financial services want to downsize? But the fact is that people are getting more prudent. They want costs under control. Do you see any sort of transition that the industry will go through regarding this?
I think you've seen a fair amount of cost rationalization over the last year and a half, 2 years. I think across all businesses, that's done. I think that's a good thing, because when you grow the way a lot of these businesses grew over the 5-6 years prior to the crisis, I think you do tend to add a lot of stuff that you otherwise don't need.
Yeah.
And I think therefore looking at that in a hard way and cold way and getting that addressed is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad
Yeah.
thing indeed.
But I still think in India you've got to have a mindset of growth. I think the mindset of cost cutting is important to get inefficiencies out of the way. But I think the mindset still has to be a growth mindset.
Nice chip.
In the hole.
Ajay, I'd be curious to know, we talk about what happens next on Dalal Street, which in some ways is the barometer of the sentiment in the country. Do you think the IPO market in general is dead for some time? Because that's where again, the retail investors' faith builds in the market.
Yeah, and I mean it's linked to the secondary market. I think you get a good secondary market, good sentiments in the in that, then it fuels the IPO market. So yes, we haven't had an IPO market for a bit.
So fundraising is going to be hard for companies, you think?
At least public fundraising has been hard for companies. So the public market hasn't really worked. The private equity market continues to work. So we play in that bit as well. So I think you are seeing more people looking at accessing private equity to be able to get the equity bit.
But I've always wondered, they like to say that it works very well when there's a crisis for private equity to step in. But many times private equity players realize that the companies were always inflated at the higher levels. So therefore what they're looking at today is very much the real value. It's not even a cheap opportunity. So really, it must take a lot to scrutinize the firms even now. It's no longer buy in crisis.
I think that doesn't change. In my view, that's why I talked about perspective and balance. You've got to have that through all cycles. I think when things are going well, you've got to question it. When things are going badly, you've got to have a balanced view on it. So I think the evaluation and the looking of a business through all cycles remains the same. Steps like the announcement on the car, I think the opening up of some NRI money coming in over here, I think all of that will give the rupee stability.
I am allowed to walk into the bush and take my stance.
Rolex shot. Yeah.
Terrible. For our viewers to get a sort of succinct perspective on these markets and the environment today, if you were to look at three factors that are governing today, we want to get your view on them. One is India is closer to Europe than to the US. US is seeing some recovery, Europe just not. Are we hugely at a risk with the state of the European Union?
I think Europe is in a very different position to the US. I think you are seeing US below trend growth, but still in growth mode. I think the leverage in the US is in Europe is going to take a long time to unwind. And I think with the demographics and the growth profile they have over there, it's going to be a while for them to get out of that. So I think that has some impact on India, but I don't think that's such a big deal. I think India is really a story about domestic consumption and a domestic economy.
But will that be good for M&A, for example? Traditionally, it was always like, that state of Europe. Rich Indians go out there, buy out.
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah, I still think you'll get opportunities around the world. I mean, not just Europe, but the US as well. I think in this environment will throw up opportunities for people who have the right, the right ability to look at opportunities and find them.
So US, is there a bet on recovery and soon?
Yeah, I think there are already good signs of recovery there. I think it's still below trend growth, but it's clearly surprised people with the buoyancy of growth. So I think you will see the US kind of coming through.
The second critical factor for the Indian markets is the rupee, something we very briefly touched upon, but people are talking of rupee hitting 56 to a dollar. What will that do to the sentiment and the interest of foreign investors in India?
Yeah, it clearly impacts the investment environment, especially uncertainty over the direction of the rupee. But I think steps like the announcement on the GAR, I think the opening up of some NRI money coming in over here, I think all of that will give the rupee stability. Plus, if oil kind of stabilizes or comes down as it has recently,
yeah,
I think that too will be good for the rupee. So I think maybe you have seen the rupee kind of starting to come back.
And my final question is about policy. We talked about GAR, of course, and then the retrospective tax changes, and any policy that one looks forward to should be pro-reform, but I guess many believe that there are steps that are probably retrograde to reform. Do you think that we're reading too much into lack of policy?
See, I think any economy like ours needs a continuous bout of reform. I think that's typically the case with a number of economies around the world. Look at the growth of Taiwan or Korea or even China. There's just been a string of reforms that kind of work through. So I think we should expect the same thing in India as well. I think you need continuous reform, not that you wait for one time or one occasion for reform to happen.
Yeah.
And I think we need a number of things to be done in the country. I think we talk about physical infrastructure. I mean, there's a lot that needs to be done with social infrastructure. We won't get our demographic dividend if we don't really focus on education and the skill building that we require.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that requires. So it's not reform doesn't have to only work with the markets.
But is there a risk that India has put all its eggs in the consumption basket, and that we're not great with manufacturing? We have natural resources, but we have far too much policy around it. Coal India is a good example of a company there, or mining issues are a good example. Do you think we're just far too much at risk by just being a market for the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think India, given the population, obviously we will be a large consumption market. So I don't think that's unnatural. But I think we do need focus on agriculture. I think there has been a lot of talk around agriculture because still 58-60% of our population stays there. You need to make sure if you're going to take people out of poverty and raise standard of living, agriculture becomes very important. And I think manufacturing as well. If you're looking at employment, which is what we will really need, we need industries that will be able to employ our youth. Then I think manufacturing becomes very important in that context too.
So we've got to really lift the game from here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ajay. It's such a pleasure having you here on
Wonderful.
the show.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
So the situation here that we have is that the ball is lying very close and in fact under this little tree over here with the plants coming out, the leaves right here. Now how do I play this particular shot? As per the rules of golf, I am allowed to walk into the bush and take my stance, but I cannot take a leaf over here and put it behind me. And similarly, when I swing, I cannot break any leaf on the tree. Okay, so you got to make sure that you go into the bush, take your stance, so with the ball safely out, I think you can also do this next time. So go ahead and play by the rules.